All right, welcome back, folks. Another episode of Tactical Enlightenment, a YouTube channel dedicated to tactics on the field and making you a better field commander in Bannerlord. So today we're going to talk about, again, sort of the brother of tactics, and that is strategy. Strategy basically involves the major decisions that you make with your kingdom. Whether or not you're going to attack a certain enemy, where you're going to attack them, how you're going to attack them, right? How you're going to assemble your armies, or it might be defending. You might say, okay, I've got castles here that are being attacked. Strategically, I need to make sure that those are secure first before I attack, right? This is part of the overall strategic picture, and it needs to be part of your thought process. For a lot of people who play games like this, that's part of what stimulates our brain, is the puzzle, is all the decision-making process that goes into a game like this, right? So I often get questions, about, how do I get my vassals, these heroes that are part of my army, how do I get them to form armies? How do I get them to attack instead of defend, and vice versa? And we're going to cover that in today's episode. We will still add a battle, as usual, or at least I hope to add a battle. We're going to try to siege one of the enemy's cities. But before we get to that, we'll talk some strategy, and I'll show you a few tips that should help you on your campaign. So backing up just a little bit too, I've had a couple requests for an overlay, sort of a summary of what's happening in my campaign. I understand a lot of the people watching don't give a shit, so we're going to kind of cover this sort of quick, but it is helpful to understand what's going on, to understand the strategic decisions that I'm making here, right? So the orange, that's my clan. That's the Grokken. It's called. When you look under your kingdom tab, you can see your larger kingdom, right? We're independent of the other kingdoms. So I'm at peace with only one enemy. That's Sturgia. They're pretty weak at this stage. They've got just a few holdings left. All the other nations, all the other kingdoms, rather, I'm at war with, right? So you see Valandia has like a third of the map. The Aserai are constantly attacking me. The Southern Empire, they're another major problem. And then the Khazate, they're also major problems for me during this campaign. I'm getting attacked a little bit by some of the smaller kingdoms as well. The Northern Empire, the Western Empire, and Battania, but obviously you can see they have a lot less castles and cities, and so they're generally mounting less of an assault on my kingdom. I've decided to make a little strategic decision, and that's why this is a perfect episode to sort of talk about strategy. I've been getting sort of hemmed in to this upper region here, this sort of snowy region by the enemies, right? They're pushing in essentially on all sides, being sieged and frankly losing territories since I decided to fight these 7 kingdoms all at once, right? It's been a slow losing battle, sort of like the tide coming in. So I've decided to change strategies, right? If you're pursuing a strategy, or if you're pursuing a tactic and it's not working, you need to be introspective. You need to look at that and say, well, what can I do to change the momentum, to change how things are going? And so I'm making a rather, I don't want to call it desperate, but it's a rather radical attempt at a strategic counterpunch to the enemy. The Southern Empire has a very large bunch of cities and castles down here. It's a very large territory, and I've decided to change that. Sometimes your best defense is a good offense. So what I decided to do, maybe a month ago, game date wise, was to go into their territory, take to the offensive, and wreak havoc into their realm, right? The game has a financial system, and what I mean by that is that the enemy AI, or yourself, of course, you must have money to wage war. As the British Empire discovered and used to great effect, money is the key to all war. If you don't have money to pay your troops, if you don't have money to recruit troops, pay for castle upgrades, you're not gonna win the war, right? So what I've decided is effectively to try to hammer the enemy's home kingdom here, sort of take the war to their turf, but also to try to severely damage their financial capacity to wage war, right? Cities provide you with income. If you can take cities out of control of the enemy, you can damage their financial capacity to fight. So there's two ways to do that, of course. First is to take their cities, right? But if I could just conquer the whole map, this whole campaign would have been over a while ago, right? I can't, because if I leave, especially if I leave for months or even years and try to conquer the Southern Empire, the other kingdoms will just eat me up from the other sides, right? And I might have cities or castles down here that I control, but I'll be completely just erased from the map up in the areas that were originally strongholds. So I am going to attack the Southern Empire. I'm actually halfway through the campaign, so to speak. What I did before I left is I made sure that a lot of my castles and keeps and cities had good-sized garrisons and then plenty of food, knowing that they were going to be sieged, knowing that these other enemies, largely impeded, would be attacking. I made sure that my cities and castles had plenty of food. You can go and look at the menu for them. Under food stocks there, it says 700. You want to make sure that you dump a bunch of food on there. And if you don't know how to do that, what you're doing is essentially collecting food from the small little towns and then selling it all to the market of these cities, right? What'll happen then is that food stocks number should cap out at like 700. Sometimes it's a bit higher depending on your perks. And then there should be a number plus afterwards. And what that is, that's basically the daily change of food, right? This city is experiencing basically a large increase in the amount of food they have. And the net effect of that is that garrison, one up from the food number there, it says, what does it say, 488, right? That number will continue to rise. And critically, if it is sieged, because it has food, that city will be able to keep the people and that garrison alive for a long time, right? A siege can take 2, 3, 4 weeks. In real life, of course, many sieges ended with the people starving to death, right? That's been a case throughout war. A lot of times the enemy would simply siege you into starving to the point where you had to request a truce or even give up the city. So we're going to try to destroy the enemy's financial capacity here. Our homeland is at least as well defended as it can be without me and my other armies being there. And that gets me to the other component of it. The artificial intelligence for your own vassals is not very good. You can't make them, siege a particular location. It'd be nice if you had that kind of macro control or micro control of your armies, but you can't. What you can do, though, is you can go to your kingdom tab into diplomacy, and you can change your war strategy, right? So right now I have it set on offensive, and what that means is that my troops are much more likely to form armies and try to take enemy cities, enemy castles, etc. And I think that's what's going on over here. I can't even tell, but these castles and this city are lit up. I've seen my armies heading in this direction. They don't actually have a large army like that. Usually it'll show like a large army like that if they're actually over here. But you can see that they have rams going on and they're clearly under siege. And I don't know for sure, but I'm almost certain that these two, the Southern Empire and the Khuzait, are not fighting each other. So I think this is a case where switching to offensive tactics, I did it a couple game weeks ago, my vassals have leapt into action, right? This army here, it says they're traveling to Kyrenia Castle to besiege, that's right here, right? So this army already took Vostrum down here, right? It took one of the cities of the Southern Empire. I took Lycaon. I don't know if I'm pronouncing these names like you do, just bear with me. The point, though, is that I was able to shift my forces, my vassals, and basically tell them, let loose the dogs of war, right? Let's go attack. My forces were already sort of congregating down here, and when they did that, fortunately the attack was fairly concentrated on the Southern Empire, right? So we're going down to the Southern Empire. We're going to try to take as many cities as we can, and whenever I take a city, you have the option essentially to devastate it. It's the top of 3 commands when you take a city or a castle, and what that effectively means is the military equivalent of sacking the city. Or even almost razing the city, where you damage and destroy a lot of the infrastructure. The peasants hate you for it. It's kind of the old sack, rape, and pillage of the medieval era, translated to Bannerlord. The net effect of that, though, is it destroys the city. or at least it highly damages the city, right? Sometimes it'll damage the walls down like 2 levels. It destroys other buildings and other infrastructure within that city, and it greatly reduces the population and hence the capacity of that city to provide that empire with money, with troops, etc. So this is under military strategy. This would fall under what's called the raised ground tactics, or scorched earth tactics. Raised ground is technically where you retreat and burn everything in sight so that the enemy that's pursuing you, is deprived of resources. But in this case, the scorched earth policy is probably a better term for it, where you go in and you just wreak havoc on that kingdom's capacity to wage war. Now, incidentally, this is what happened in the Civil War. General Grant very early on came up with the idea of the war, not of attrition. The war of attrition is where you destroy their troops, but effectively a war where you destroy the army's capacity to fight. Right, the Northern Union Army went into the South and just devastated the Confederate Army's capacity to wage war. Right, there's another name for it. I can't remember off the top of my head. But that's effectively what we're doing here. Instead of directly fighting the enemy, we're trying to destroy his capacity to wage war. Right? If you can get in and really damage their financial situations, my hope is that the Southern Empire will be set back for a long time by this campaign. It won't be without cost. Right? I'm getting attacked and sieged. They haven't taken any significant keeps yet. Actually, I beg your pardon. The Aserai looks like they've taken Rotai, or however you pronounce that. Looks like they've taken that back yet, and there are other places being sieged already. This one is particularly worrisome because it's right in the middle of my kingdom. And from the notes on the side, it looked like the Battanians were sieging that. Right, so I'm being besieged by 4, 5, 6 of the enemies at the same time. It's likely to get worse before it gets better, but this was a risk I took. Right. So, for the practical side of things, and hopefully people haven't already clicked out of the video because I do think I have some stuff to offer. Let's talk about your own vassals, right? Your own vassals, when you go to the kingdom page, the clan page, these are your vassal clans, right? These are the clans that all fall under your kingdom, right? If you're king of Valandi or whatever, you want to go to this page and assess them. When you click on these, it shows you obviously the members that are in there. In this case, there's only one. Some of them have a lot, right? The key thing, though, from here is that armies need influence, right? You have to have influence using this tab to gather your forces, right? Now, I have a huge amount of influence because I'm very late game, but your vassals also need influence to form armies, right? Like this army that's formed here, 1,600 troops. This vassal is running through their influence to maintain that army, right? You must do that, and the game mechanics do that as well. You'll actually see the enemy armies dissolve because they run out of influence sometimes, right? Now, in my stage, most of my clans have a huge amount of influence, right? Like this one actually looks bugged. I don't know how they have more influence than me. Maybe they're going to try to take over at some point. But the point is that your influence varies from clan to clan based on their holdings. I think at one point I did have this clan holding a huge amount of cities for me. The point I'm trying to make here, it's a long way of saying you can improve the amount of influence they have. Because if they don't have enough influence, they won't create an army. You can also just expel them from your clan. I don't suggest that. But you can effectively increase the amount of influence they have, right? In this case, most of my clans have plenty of influence, right? When you go there, you can just punch this button. It costs you 50 influence every time you hit it. You can see my influence there, up there in the upper left, kind of going down. The relation is going up, right? Like you can improve relations with people with this. Incidentally, this is a minor clan. This is a minor clan that we were able to pay to join our empire. There's no point in doing that, except if you need relation improvement with this minor clan, right? The minor clans don't form large armies, and so they don't need influence. Obviously, they don't really have influence. But what you can do is you can punch that button and increase influence with a minor clan that maybe you've really pissed off in the past. All right, so the point of all that is that you add influence to other clans within your kingdom, and then they will start to form armies, right? That's sort of the gist of that. Well, the second component of it, and this is very important, is your other clans need finances to recruit troops. they need cities to have troops available for. And so you see in this case I have at least 2 or 3 cities that, if you look up at the top there, it says Clan de Gunrick. That is one of the clans in my kingdom. They own this city. They get the revenue from it. They get the garrison is more available to them. In fact, I can't go to their garrison and take their troops, right? So this one is another one. The one that's being sieged up here is also under the control of one of my vassals, right? Now, that's important because it gives those vassals and it gives the leader of that clan money to wage war. Now, all troops have money, but the leaders of clans is especially important. So you go into here and you say talk to party leader. Comes up to this menu and you can say there's something I'd like to discuss. And what this does is it brings up the barter page. Now this is, normally you don't really need to use this. Here's the exception. This guy actually has a lot of money because I've been doing this for a while. But every once in a while, with the leader of the clan, you don't want to give it to the non-leaders because they'll just waste the money. But the leader of the clan, I actually will give them money, and sometimes I'll give them, like like a large chunk of gold. In this case, we're actually going to give him 1 million gold. He says thanks, pockets the gold. And you're wondering, well, why would I do that? What that does is it allows him to pay for his army, right? If he has a lot of troops that he wants to recruit, but he has no gold, he can't do it, right? The game, there's no shortcuts for the artificial intelligence. Now I think the enemy artificial intelligence kind of gets some advantages. It might cheat sort of around the edges, but it sort of follows those same rules, right? So I've now given this guy money. He's happy. He likes me more. But more importantly, he has the money to go out and now hire troops. A lot of people express frustration. I'm holding the Alt button here to take a closer look at his army. A lot of the people express frustration. Look at that, Imperial recruits. This guy, and by the way, he's kind of a dipshit. Take a closer look at him. This guy, look, he's like 4 foot tall. Unless they're named Napoleon, I never really trust a leader. It's 4 foot tall. He looks like a dipshit there trying to Mac Daddy his haircut. But this guy, I swear, when he leads an army, they always lose. I mean, this guy, it just says loser right across his armor, right? Like his troops go into battle, totally distraught. I don't really trust this guy. He seems to lose a lot. But this is part of the reason. If you look under, those are his troops. He has 58 Imperial recruits, right? That's like the lowest level troop almost you can have. And part of the reason they do that is because the AI just gathers up troops. It gathers up numbers. It's not very good at selecting high-level troops. And you're saying, well, that sucks. Why would I give money to some guy who's just going to buy a bunch of peasants to get slaughtered? There is a reason. And what we can do is we can donate troops to this guy. We can say, hey, your troops suck. You got all these recruits. Now, I can't pull them out. I wish I could pull his recruits out of there. Because if I could do that, I would pull his recruits out and stick them in a garrison and give him better troops. But what we're going to do actually is force feed this guy good troops, right? Britannian Fian champs, these are like some of the best units in the game. I've got some other units here. I'm not going to pay super precise attention here because that's not the point. The point though is you could force feed, you see his troop number going up. You could force feed these units, higher level units. You can't give them beyond their maximum. You get a little bit of influence when you do this. And that guy, I'm over the limit right now, and I'll explain that in a second. But that guy now has better troops. And if I dismissed him, he would go off with his better troops and have a higher chance for success. Now, I do this frequently. This army here, yes, you can sort of see there are lots of elite troops in this army, right? Before I went on this campaign, I shoved elite troops into most of my army groups. Anybody who is missing 20 troops in their capacity, I went and force-fed them, a bunch of hired elite pikes and sturgeon champions and etc. And the point is that this army here is going to be much better prepared for a campaign than the armies that you have where the artificial intelligence just forms them up and they're sort of stumbling around out there with weak troops, right? So I don't want to beleaguer this point, but that's one major way you can really improve your kingdom strength, right? By making your heroes, making your companions, making your vassals a lot stronger, right? They still need money, again, to pay for those troops, though. So it's important that they have, in this case, again, cities. They need to have influence, which we showed previously. and they need to have troops, right? That guy now has all of the recipe for success, and in this case he's in our army, but if you have your vassals forming up other armies, like these are probably some of my vassals sieging, you want them to have the best possible troops so that they have the best possible chance to win battles, right? I hope that makes sense. So that's gold. Influence keeps with your vassals. Policies. I'll cover policies very briefly. So you have, this is almost dizzying for the average player jumping in. You have all these policies. It's a really cool idea. You have essentially the ability to pass laws for your kingdom. But I'll just give you one example really quick that's important. When you take a town in a foreign area, loyalty is often your biggest problem, right? If you have really low loyalty, your town will rebel. It will capture all your citizens, or capture all your citizens rather, capture all your garrison, and expel you from control of that city. Well, this policy alone, this single policy, increases your loyalty by 2 every day. So this is a good example of a policy that really should be automatic. Now it reduces your production, right? So they're not producing as much gold. It might even reproduce less food, but that doesn't matter. The biggest key is you're keeping control of that city, right? A city that's sort of weaker and has less income is worth a lot more than a city that's rebelling, where now the rebels are attacking you, right? That's much worse, right? So your policies are very important. I'm not going to go over them at all beyond that one. You have lots of policies to go through. It's kind of fun to manage all this stuff. If you're interested, you can see I have some active policies, but I'm not going to waste 20 minutes today doing that. Just know that that's another thing you can do with this kingdom page. With the army page, you can see that I have this other gal who's out there rampaging with 1,600 troops, and then I showed you the clan page, right, where you can support your clans so that they have a better chance for success, right? All right, so moving on now, continuing with the strategy here. What I like to do, we're getting an autosave. What I like to do is I like to go to towns and load up on troops before a siege. You will get deserters, right? My own army, we're 25 over the limit right now, so we're automatically getting deserters. Okay, so that's that army. That's one of our armies going over there. The first thing I'll do is I'll hit recruit troops, right? That adds troops, and then I just tell these guys, no, you will give me more troops, right? You force them to give you more. Sometimes they fight. Usually they're not going to fight if you have 2,000 troops like we do. And then look at, they're giving me 29 imperial recruits. And you might say, well, you just told me those kind of recruits are shit, right? I was just saying in the previous section, don't bother with these. Well, here's the difference. When I take a city, it's telling you you're over the limit and you may have troops abandoned. That's fine. When you take a city, you're going to have suddenly this garrison you need to fill. Those imperial recruits do a decent job of at least filling the garrison, right? If the enemy knows you have 12 guys in a keep or a city, they're way more likely to attack, right? If you have imperial recruits and maybe some other troops that you can stick there, you've got a much better chance of taking it. Well, this city is going to be a bitch to take. This is going to be a pretty epic siege. There are 1,600 troops. And look at the prosperity. It's starting to go down, but this must be like their capital. All right, well, that challenge is good. Like, we're here for a challenge. These guys might even reinforce it. We're here for a challenge. Speaking of a challenge, we got more castles. I mean, it's just an onslaught. I left my home defenses, and it's just like the whole frontier is alight with castles being sieged, right? So there's a price I'm paying for this campaign. This is lovely. So their forces are going to reinforce that city. If you're lucky, you can wait a little while and they will exit. The enemy forces that are... You see I'm doing the exact same thing here, right? I'm recruiting troops. I'm ordering them to give me more peasants, right? Now my number is way over. It's because I have a bunch of peasants here at the bottom. They will start to... These guys that I just recruited, they will start to desert, but they'll desert kind of slowly. It doesn't happen instantaneously, right? We're buying everything they have, right? We're on a long campaign. We need food. We need resources, even though it's slowing us down. And speaking of, before any siege, right? I'm gonna make sure I have the right loadout. You've seen me do this before, probably. I want to make sure I have plenty of javelins, right? When you're in a siege, the ability to hammer the enemy with lots of javelins from the from the base of the siege is very important. If you only have melee weapons, okay, I have deserters, that's okay. All right, these guys are sieging up there, that's good. If you only have melee weapons, you're at a serious disadvantage outside of a siege. Akasur Castle is being defended. Right, so the little message bar down here, let me pause it again. This is really valuable when you're away from your home kingdom because it's telling you what the hell's going on. And another city being besieged is basically mostly bad news for me here. Our team is allying, or excuse me, our allies are sieging here. Right, they're sieging this castle. Akasur Castle, so this is our forces, and they're being attacked. It looks like defended by a Khazate army. And then finally, Lycaron is being sieged. I've got it paused right now. Sometimes you just want to catch your breath. Yeah, so another city is being sieged. This is one we just took, and the enemy's already attacking it. In fact, I won't be shocked if they're right on our heels, right? The music tells you how ominous things look right now. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5 different locations of ours that are being sieged, right? I guess it could be 7. So, well, I didn't even barely get the words out, and they're sieging another one, right? Sinopa, the one that I told you before, we left a lot of food there. There's a huge garrison there, 1,000 total troops between the militia and the garrison. Now they're being sieged, right? So it's an onslaught, but that makes for more challenge, more fun, right? I did go into this campaign hoping for a challenge, right? So you've seen me do this before. We are going to siege. Yeah, there's a lot of troops in there. We're still going to do this. We're going to run at normal player damage as well. I don't like to save scum. If my character gets knocked unconscious in the first 10 minutes here, I probably just won't show you this part of the battle. But we're going to besiege. I like to slow it down in the early stages because it speeds up everything. I like to sort of figure out what's going on here first. And look at this. They have 2,000 troops in their garrison. So this is going to be a war, a total slugfest if we are successful. And the enemy just took one of our castles, right? Not only are they sieging, they're successfully sieging, right? Down here in Pendraic, and that was a pretty important castle for me. So we're paying the price. You see me do this before. Before this bar finishes, in fact, I'm going to pause it. You want to click all these boxes for trebuchet, because we're going to be using trebs to siege this city. I don't think there's any way with siege towers or a couple ladders that we're going to be able to mount any kind of offensive against 2,000 defenders. That's definitely the most defenders I've ever tried to take. No guts, no glory though, so we're going to give this a shot. We got a ram and a siege tower down there. Our force outnumbers them, but anybody who's ever been in a siege, usually you need significantly more attackers than defenders, right? And not only that, I'm still going to get deserters, right? I can do some upgrades. I'm overstaffed, so to speak. The capacity of this guy to lead is less than his father, so we're simply not going to be able to maintain as large an army. So we're going to get deserters. Our number's actually going to go down. Looking at the food of this place, it would take me forever to starve them, right? It says they have level 3 walls and lots of food. We might, in fact, it says we have 0 days of food, but I know for a fact we have grain. We would definitely starve first before they would starve, right? So this is a very slow process, and I can't zoom out anymore, but up here in the corner you can kind of see all of these keeps are still under siege. And another, when it's lit up in orange here, that's a defeat. So one of my big army groups just got wiped out by the enemy. So things look pretty dire at this stage. Oops. We're losing cities, they're sieging us everywhere. I apologize for my phone. Let's throw that away. So we're going to do a little bit of a siege here, and this is kind of a gamble, because while I'm doing this, and as you're going to see, it's the second day of winter, this might take 4, 5, 6 days. This is a very heavily fortified city. Speed this up just a touch. I've showed this before, but if you've never seen this before, as you build your trebuchets, you want to click that button that says, there go our people, that says move to reserve, right? And what that does is you can think of it like moving your siege engines back from the city you're sieging, right? We're moving them out of range until they're all ready together, right? You wouldn't send one guy at a time in a battle. And so similarly, we're building trebuchets. They build one at a time. It's kind of slow to build, even if you have good siege skill. And then once they're built, you want to click Move to Reserve before the enemy pounds them with their counter artillery, right? So I've got 3 built right now. If I click this, yeah, see it says 3. But I want to wait until this 4th one is almost done before I activate them, right? A day has already gone by. This is very time consuming. And again, this is a risky endeavor because my entire kingdom right now is basically under assault. But I'm trying to deal one more savage blow here to the enemy. This one's almost done, so we're going to activate the other trebs, right? They take a second to rebuild. I think this is a new change with the new packs, new patch. And now they're all up, right? All the trebs are up. They're firing. Our goal here is to blow a hole in one of these walls, right? We've got to blow a hole so that we have more access between that, our siege ram, and our siege tower, right? I'm actually going to build both siege towers. Now, the health of your trebuchets is going down because the enemy siege is hammering them, but your trebuchets are also destroying enemy counter siege, right? How it effectively works is they have to destroy the enemy counter siege before they really start focusing on the wall. Right, there's no point in attacking somebody if you're being stabbed in the back, right? So they're covering both the enemy's counter siege, but also occasionally lobbing rounds onto their walls, right? So I'm going to speed this up just a little bit. This can take days sometimes. You want to watch the health. I've got my finger sort of hovered over the standard speed button. That's because if you lose a trebuchet, you need to rebuild it immediately. Sometimes in battles you don't lose any trebuchets. You can see the walls here. They're down to about half health. Sometimes in really long sieges like this, you have to rebuild your trebuchets multiple times, right? If the enemy has really good siege defenders inside there, I've taken a week plus to siege before, right? I've got one wall down to a little less than half. Our trebs are still doing okay. We got a couple here that are weakened, but we're doing all right still. Alright, so fast forward in a little bit. If they turn red, that's when I'll slow it down. I'll slow it down to sort of focus on those trebuchets so I can rebuild them as soon as they're dropped. Meanwhile, of course, days have passed now. We started this on the 2nd. It's now the 6th. Well, at least that's good news. Those ally forces took a castle. So that's nice. Finally some good news in a sea of bad news. Now I'm going to slow it down here again because we have 2 walls that are almost down. And when these walls drop, I might even wait for both of them. We are going to attack. We've got our ram and towers built. Now the towers actually are irrelevant. When you have a wall down, your troops will simply go to where there's a hole in the wall. Okay, I'm down 1 trebuchet. I'm actually going to build a fire ballista here at the last second. Both walls are down. As soon as this fire ballista is up, I'm going to attack. And I think this has been a long enough recording that I'm going to break this into 2 parts. I'm actually going to pause right here and halt this video, and I'll continue it in another video. See part 2.